The Federal Reserve System works every day to support a growing and stable U.S. economy. Across the United States, the Federal Reserve, through its Federal Reserve Education Program, also helps people understand how the economy works, so consumers have the tools to make sound financial decisions. Through this education program, teachers have access to classroom-ready online resources for students from kindergarten to college. Videos, classroom lessons, online education, publications, and more. These resources are all free for educators to use in their lesson plans, or as they see fit. Many of the Federal Reserve System's regional reserve banks, located in 12 districts across the nation, also offer in-person and online professional development that allows educators to deepen their knowledge and hone their craft when it comes to economics, personal finance, and more. Students, too, can take advantage of in-person opportunities by taking tours of exhibits in many of the 12 Federal Reserve banks around the country. Whether a student visits with their family or a school group, they get an in-depth look at how the Federal Reserve works to promote a healthy, sustainable U.S. economy. At the Board and Reserve banks, students also get hands-on opportunities like internships and participation on student boards, which introduce them to key economics concepts and potential careers in economics and finance. Consumers are empowered to make sound financial decisions through the availability of easy-to-understand resources that explain personal finance concepts, the broader economy, and the Federal Reserve's role in it. Federal Reserve Education is committed to equipping educators, educating students, and empowering consumers when it comes to understanding and participating in our evolving economy. For more information, visit federalreserveeducation.org to find links to resources and Reserve Bank programs offered near you, and follow Federal Reserve Education on Twitter at @FedEconEd.
What is the Fed?
So what is the Fed?
What is the Fed?
What is the Fed?
The Federal Reserve, often referred to as the Fed, is the central bank of the United States.
Congress created the Fed in 1913 to help promote a safe and sound monetary and financial system for our nation.
The Fed includes the Board of Governors in Washington, D.C., which has 7 members, including the chairman and vice chairman.
All of the members of the board are appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the United States Senate.
The Fed also includes 12 regional Federal Reserve banks located in cities throughout the country.
The reserve banks serve as the central bank's operating arms and also gather economic information from all over the country
To help the Fed both monitor the economy and get the broad input necessary
To develop and implement effective U.S. monetary policy.
Today, the Fed performs a number of important functions, all with the ultimate goal of promoting a healthy U.S. economy.
One of the Fed's most recognizable functions is conducting U.S. monetary policy, which involves influencing interest rates and the availability of money and credit in our economy.
Congress has tasked the Fed with implementing monetary policies that promote maximum employment and stable prices.
High levels of employment provide people with more economic opportunities, and stable prices promote growth
By making it easier for households and businesses to plan for the future.
Monetary policy decisions at the Fed are made by the Federal Open Market Committee,
which includes all 7 members of the Board of Governors and presidents from the reserve banks.
This committee meets regularly to assess the conditions and outlook for the economy.
In addition to conducting monetary policy, the Federal Reserve also helps to supervise and regulate the nation's banks and works to promote a stable financial system for consumers, communities, and businesses.
The Fed also works with communities, nonprofit organizations, and others across the nation to address housing problems, promote equal access to credit, and advance economic and community development.
The Fed also promotes stability in the financial system, because instability in the financial system can pose a severe threat to the broader economy and communities across the nation.
The Fed also acts as a bank to other banks by clearing checks, making electronic payments, and providing the currency that Americans need and use every day.
Our nation's economy and financial system face constant challenges.
The Fed is working every day to address those challenges and is committed to helping foster good economic conditions and outcomes. employment opportunities, stable prices, and financial stability that benefit all Americans.
And we are also the Fed.
To learn more about the Federal Reserve, you'll find a wide range of resources on the Board of Governors website at federalreserve.gov.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for joining the Federal Reserve Board at our Spring Exploring Careers in Economics. We're grateful for the time you choose to spend with us and are excited to continue hosting this event virtually. Today's event is being recorded, so if you know of anyone that might benefit from watching this later, feel free to share. My name is Jocelyn Jackson, and I'm the lead economics outreach specialist. My work focuses on bringing transparency to our application and interview processes and empowering students to opt in to our opportunities. We have a packed hour today. You'll hear from Governor Lisa Cook, followed by the Boston Fed President, Susan Collins, and from a panel of research assistants from across the Federal Reserve System. We do our best to address questions that we receive, and our goal for you today is to feel more confident about pursuing econ studies and a career in economics. At the end of our session today, for those of you who joined via WebEx, you'll have the option to stay and join a breakout room to further engage with research assistants and Fed staff. If you're watching via the Federal Reserve website or YouTube, visit our website to learn how else you might engage with us in the future. I hope that you leave today's event with an interest that will lead you down the path of economics and with more information on how to pursue the field. Moving into the first part of today's event, we'll hear opening remarks from Governor Cook. Governor Lisa Cook took office as a member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System on May 23, 2022. Prior to her appointment at the board, Dr. Cook was a professor of economics and international relations at Michigan State University. She was also a research associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research. Previously, Dr. Cook was on the faculty of Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. During her time at Harvard, Dr. Cook also served as Deputy Director for Africa Research at the Center of International Development. Before then, she was a National Fellow at Stanford University. Dr. Cook received a BA in philosophy from Spelman College, and as a Marshall Scholar, she received a second BA in philosophy, politics, and economics from Oxford University. She earned her PhD in economics from the University of California, Berkeley. Thanks for joining us today, Governor Cook.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Exploring Careers in Economics. I am disappointed I cannot be with you in person, but I am thrilled you will hear from Boston Fed President Susan Collins. She is an outstanding colleague and economist and a good friend. You are in for a fantastic discussion. The event has a fairly self-explanatory title, Exploring Careers in Economics, but the broad range of opportunities is anything but straightforward. Economics touches every aspect of daily life, and you can see its impact in the world outside your door, and inside as well. Some of you are veterans of economic study, while some of you are just econ curious. Either way, I hope that when you sign off today, you will have a totally different view of what economics can offer you. I was raised by academics in a college town. But even that access and insight did not give me the full picture of what was out there. A career in economics can take you in directions you never thought possible. We live in a constantly changing world, which means there is always new research to undertake, questions to be posed, and ground to break. My own studies allowed me to investigate everything from the impact of patents on the nation's economic growth to the banking system in post-Soviet Russia. They also took me to the archives of the Kremlin and to university in the United Kingdom and Senegal. And that was just during my education. My career has taken me all over the globe. Economics can take you just about anywhere, figuratively and literally. So I do hope that we do a good job of showing you the world of possibilities in the field, because economics needs you. Any field that studies the behavior of an entire population, as economics does, should reflect the population it studies. We all come to the table with different experiences and backgrounds, which give each of us unique perspectives. Your generation has seen 2 once-in-a-century economic events within 2 decades. Your economic experiences are different from anyone else's. That insight and understanding will be critical to policymakers. The economics profession needs your perspective. Future Fed staff, governors, and chairs may be participating today. I hope we manage to play a small part in sending you down that path. Finally, on that note, I would like to encourage everyone to reach out to others joining today. Strong networks of both mentors and peers can be a lifeline. They are critical to entering and completing advanced degree programs. They help navigate the professional landscape, and they will offer both support and advice as you advance in your career. And we do hope that for some of you, that path is economics, and you will make the Federal Reserve a stop along the way. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the day.
Thank you, Governor Cook, for your message today. I'm happy to move into our next segment and introduce Susan M. Collins, President and CEO of the Boston Fed. Susan joined the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston in July of 2022. She oversees all the bank's activities, including economic research and analysis, banking supervision and financial stability efforts, community economic development activities, and a wide range of payments, technology, and financial initiatives. Susan is an international macroeconomist with a lifelong interest in policy and its impact on living standards. She has published widely and served as provost, dean, professor, research scholar, and a board member at a variety of universities and organizations, including the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, where she served as director for 9 years. Susan earned her PhD in economics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Susan, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's absolutely a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to say up front, apologies for my voice. I am, it is recovering, but have been looking forward to our conversation and to being with all of our, potentially aspiring economists on the call today.
Thank you. So during our time together today, I'd like for us to get to know you a little bit more with some kind of rapid fire questions, and then we'll move into learning more about your experience, and we're open to receiving any advice you have you would like to share with us today. Does that sound all right?
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Great. We can get started. So quick questions first. What does your morning routine look like?
So when I get up, I really need my first cup of coffee, and I like to combine that with a bit of news. So I typically am looking at different newspapers. I'm also an NPR junkie, and so always have that first cup of coffee and enjoy it, and sometimes have a second one along the way.
Love it. Is your best work done in the morning, or are you a night owl?
So that's an interesting one. I am totally a night owl, and if you'd asked me some years ago, I would have said always at night, in part because you have like this expanse of time. But interestingly, over time, I now think I knew my best work in the morning. And I don't know whether that was many years of having kids and having to get them ready for school. And, if you stay up all night, it's really hard to drag them out of bed in the morning. But I would say I now do my best work early in the morning.
Okay, great. And can you share a fun fact about yourself?
Sure. So when I was in college, I was actually a fullback back on the women's soccer team, and was something that I enjoyed tremendously. Had not been a very athletic student in high school or middle school, and just loved the opportunity to be on a team and to engage in a very different way with friends and others. So that was just a fun experience that many people don't know about me.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. So part of your story is that you've navigated your studies and your professional life as an introvert. And I was hoping that you could talk to us today more about what preparation and practice you've had to speak up in classrooms and in professional settings.
Sure. And this is actually something that since, most of my career was in higher ed, that I've spent a lot of time talking to students from my classes, research assistants with over time, because I think the presumption is when you see people giving seminars and doing other things that it's always just come automatically to them and has taken, has not been challenging in different ways. And I think it's important to just really reiterate that there's no one path and there's no one right way to do things. I used to get tremendous stage fright and really did not want to speak up at all. But was advised and recognized that it can be important to do that, and it gets a lot easier over time. Practice really helps. So let me just say a couple of things that that I did along the way. One was, since I didn't speak up a lot in class, and especially in graduate school, that can be really important. But what I would do is I would make lists of my questions and go to office hours and get to know the faculty or teaching assistant and kind of talk to them about, so would this have been a good question to ask in class? And started becoming more vocal in class as well. Also say there's some students who are too vocal in class. That's actually not helpful either. And sometimes being a bit of an introvert means you're a good listener. And so you have a really good sense of who's saying what and how to interact in different ways. So, I'm also a big preparer. I think being ready to do things is really helpful. And over time, it just does get a lot easier. And at least for me, I found that I enjoyed more of the interactions as I got more comfortable with them and more used to them. But I still do a lot of background preparation.
Okay, great. I love those pieces of advice and the point that you're a good listener. I imagine that a lot of practice there to help you kind of suss out some of your answers. And I'm also wondering from the perspective of others who find that they have to skill up in their communication style. It may seem as if this particular skill takes forever to grow. Can you share some lessons learned and how you feel at this point in your career?
Sure. So let me say a couple of other things about that. I mean, one of the big ones is being able to get up in front of a room and make a presentation, whether it's giving a class, whether it's giving a seminar, whether it's commenting on something. And as I mentioned before, I used to get really, really nervous about that. I wouldn't necessarily sleep well before. And people would say, "Oh, you'll be fine," which actually kind of makes it worse because it feels like they're just like raising the bar. And it's not particularly reassuring at all because it just feels like the stakes are even higher if you mess up. And there was one time that I remember really clearly when I was just having a lot of trouble sleeping, and I realized that, you know what? I'm nervous every time, and I should just get used to it. And so what I realized over time is it's almost like that's a part of me that comes with me when I give a talk, and that's where a lot of my energy comes from now. And so, if I weren't to get nervous before, the beginning of every semester, even though I taught for decades, I'd be nervous before the first day of class. And, part of my energy and part of my just approach would come from the nerves, which would actually almost be empowering. And so to me, it's literally, I had the image when I was younger that I was putting my arm around. It was almost like my little cousin was this bundle of nerves, and we were going to go in there together and we were going to do this thing. And over time, that kind of is a funny image, but that was helpful. And I also realized that most of the people, whether they admitted it or not, were just as nervous as I was. And maybe I was being a little bit more honest about that. And over time, it just got a lot better. And sometimes you do mess up, and you know what? That's okay. The one other thing I'll say that I have done throughout is to find someone who is going to be there, at least one person, and say, I want to get better at this. So after I'm done, I'm going to ask you to tell me, what do you think I did well? And what's a suggestion for something I could do better? And then you're realizing that you don't have to be perfect about it every time, but each time you do it, you're going to learn something and you're going to hopefully grow in a different way. And that also, that mindset to me was really helpful because it didn't seem like it was a one-shot thing. Those are some of the things that have been helpful for me. And I have to say, I now enjoy being able to be in front of a group, especially if I can try to explain something complicated or share information. That's something that I think, economics is a real mystifier for many people. And I really do think it's a very helpful framework for understanding lots of things about the real world we live in. And to me, that's really an opportunity I find satisfying to try to explain the lens that economics brings to different kinds of topics. And it's something I look forward to. If you had asked me years ago whether I would look forward to getting in front of a group and talking to them, I would have said never. But that's very much how I feel about it now.
Great, thank you. So to recap, I took away that you would make lists of questions and utilize office hours. And that also helped prepare you to hone in on your listening skills. Preparation is definitely key. And then you embrace how you feel and help that use that more as a motivator. And then finally, you seek out feedback. That all sound correct?
Absolutely. And, getting the help of others is kind of a theme here. There are lots of different ways that we can support and help each other. And, that comes out, I think, in lots of the things that, as I look back on my career, that I think about.
Great, thank you so much. I'd like to move into our next topic. You've had a successful career while raising a family. You mentioned them earlier. And I'd like to chat about that exchange of life and work for a few minutes. I know some people call it a balance, some people call it an exchange. I definitely now, as a mom, perceive it as an exchange. And I believe that it's important to understand that it's never easy, but it's also not impossible. So as a mom, I struggle with this, and I'm definitely seeking advice for myself and for others who will one day be in the same situation. So I know at different points in your career, you've discussed that maybe you weren't as productive in your work because of life. How did you navigate that? And how did you redefine those expectations at work and at home?
So first of all, let me say congratulations on being a mom and on having to navigate that challenging exchange, balance, all of that. It is hard. It is definitely hard. But it's also really rewarding. I mean, I would say that having children while navigating challenging parts of my career added, kind of a reminder of, so what's really important here, making sure that you do take some time away. And I think that's really healthy and helpful. So let me say a couple of, I mean, each of these are huge topics, so there's lots to say. There's no one pathway. There's no one way to do these things. I have been, I would say, really blessed to have a very supportive husband who is has throughout our marriage been extremely involved, not just in childcare, but also house care, things like that, which is not always the case. And that has been really, really important and valuable. It is much harder when you're a single parent and if you don't necessarily have support structures. So, when I did wait until after I had tenure before, so I was an older mom when when my daughter arrived. And I'd also done a lot of things, which I think made it easier for me to say no to a number of trips. As an international economist, one of the things I got to do was travel a lot, which I really not only enjoyed, but continue to enjoy. And so I was quite explicit that there were times when it was just important, not only for me to be there, but sometimes I just had to be there because my husband might be traveling. And we did relocate when my kids were younger to be near family. That helped a lot. And we leveraged their time and resources. But I think that it's also important to both know yourself and what's most important to you, and also to recognize that other people can help you navigate what's most important to do and where to say no. Because if you say yes, it often turns out that more and more people to ask you to do things. I think that is especially true for women and people of color. I mean, I realized at one point when I was an assistant professor that I felt like I was, maybe saying no more often, but I think I got asked 5 times as often as my colleague who was, hired the same time as I did, who was male and not a minority, to do stuff. And so even though I was saying no, I was doing 3 times more committees and other things than he was. And so getting help to know when you can just say no. When I was a dean, I actually told all of our junior faculty and all of our women, whether they were and people of color, that if they got asked to do something, they could just say that their dean said they had to ask their dean, whether they wanted to do it or not. And that meant I could be the one who said no, so that they didn't have to be the one to say no, because that can be hard if you're saying no to a senior colleague or to somebody who you might need, who can be really helpful to you. So looking for people who can be supportive is one of the lessons. Looking for people who can give you advice about what are the priorities, what's the right balance, and recognizing that it is okay to say no. It's okay to take time for yourself and your family. And you're not the only one who's struggling because it's challenging. It is, and you probably won't get as much sleep all the time as you might like to. It's also fun. I mean, I love being a mom. I just have to say that explicitly. It's something that, is critical to me and who I am.
Yeah, I agree. Not without its challenges, but also a lot of joy. In a similar vein, so as you're balancing, life and work, how do you manage keeping like that balance of keeping your head down versus working with team engagement? So not necessarily that FOMO, right? The fear of missing out at work, but more so, are you seen as engaged enough when you're juggling so many different priorities? Do you have any advice there?
Yeah, so I think the starting point on that one is that different jobs are really different in terms of what the expectations are. And so getting a bit of clarity when you join a new organization, or even if you've been in the organization for a while, but you perhaps move into a different role, of how to think about what the expectations are and when you actually really need to be there, when it's nice to be there, and when it may not be as critical. I would say, for example, in a lot of academic institutions, if you're getting your papers done and you're teaching your classes, you don't really need to be as visible. But in some other organizations, it's really important to have that face time to engage. Relationships are always important. I don't want to be misunderstood about that. But what is most important to do is really different in different places. And that's something that a kind of more seasoned person in your organization can help you to understand. And then recognizing that, they're going to be, so I tend to not think about a week, but maybe think about a month or a semester or a quarter. And so if you're being engaged, you don't have to be as engaged every week or every day. Have a bit of a longer horizon. So if there's a period where you're spending more time on family or on yourself, whether it's health reasons or whatever it is, that's okay. Find windows when you can spend more time doing the other balance, and try to map that out. Again, yes, I am a planner, a bit of a preparer, but taking a bit of a longer horizon, people will remember that you were really engaged when you were working on X over that time period, even if the month following that they may not see you as much because maybe you're spending more time with your kids or your parents, or whatever the other needs or other parts of your life might be. So I hope that some of those are some helpful suggestions, but it is a challenge, and those are those are years in my life that I look back on with a lot of fondness, but they were pretty stressful while I was going through them.
Thank you for sharing and for being so honest about your experiences. In the interest of time, I'd like to move us to mentorship, if that's okay. We have had a lot of questions from students around this topic, so here we go. In what ways has mentorship impacted your pathway in economics? Is there a story you can share with us about how a mentor helped guide you in a pivotal moment in your studies or your career?
Yeah, and I would say that there are lots of different kinds of mentors. And as I look back on my career, there are people who were providing support that I didn't necessarily recognize as mentors at the time, but they absolutely were playing that role. And so I've had mentors who have helped me in terms of you know, choice about graduate school and about jobs, about, certainly finishing dissertations and things like that. I've also had mentors who've helped with some of the issues we were just talking about, work-life balance, and I mentioned some examples of that. One example that I'm going to give is actually from when I was an undergraduate and a professor in a class I was taking. That was an okay class. I mean, I liked it, but it certainly wasn't something that was my absolute favorite. And he came up to me after class one day and offered me a job. And my thought was, I actually want to do international economics, and this is labor economics. But I said, okay, well, let me try it. And it was one of the best things that I did because it enabled me, first of all, to get a real experience of doing a research project, working as part of a team. And he was a fabulous mentor and someone who I've engaged with throughout my career in a variety of different contexts. And so, that's an example of being open to an opportunity that you might be offered that isn't necessarily what you thought of was part of your plan. Um, that can really provide all kinds of learnings and benefits, and also developing a relationship of somebody who can be helpful. I mean, he was extremely helpful in terms of reference letters and other things. And so that's one example that I would give.
Great, thank you. How would you recommend in those early in their careers to go about establishing relationships with other professionals? Is that, attending office hours? Is it attending networking events? What guidance that you
So
have?
from my perspective, the big picture is that you want to give I'll call them more seasoned people who you are might be hoping that someone among a pool will turn out to be a strong mentor for you. You want to give them opportunities to get to know you. I've typically developed mentoring relationships with students who took a class from me. And it's the ones in the class that I actually got to know because they came to office hours or they stopped me in the hallway and chatted with me or they engaged with me in some way. And so I felt like I had a connection with them and I got to know them. Um, Students who've come up to me who I had no connection with and asked, would I write them a letter or what? I mean, I would always meet with students and give them my thoughts and advice, but it's much harder to mentor someone that you haven't gotten to know in some substantive way. And I think a lot in economics, I think that's particularly true that professionals want to have had some engagement. So absolutely, identify ways to reach out to them so that they know who you are, and then trust your own instincts about, is this somebody who seems like someone I would really trust, someone who would be candid with me and who would have my interests at heart in terms of the kinds of thoughts and feedback that they provide. I think often your own gut reaction to that is helpful. But starting by actually taking the step of making that outreach, I think is just important.
Thank you. And currently in your career, do you have time to mentor others?
Not as much time as I'd like, but it's important to me. I mean, I still have some people from the University of Michigan who I was involved with in different ways, who I am, in touch with, maybe not as often as I would like. And, I'm always interested in trying to be helpful in ways that I can to people. One of the phrases that I have really taken to heart, so President Esther George, who was until recently president of the Kansas City Fed, she used to say that, it's not only that you want to try to open doors, you want to find a way to hold them open for people. And so that kind of mindset is one that says that you try to be supportive and available when you can, and there are different ways to do that. I would also say that for everyone who's on this call, regardless of where you are in your own journey, you can be a mentor and provide support to folks who are earlier in their journey than you are. And I think serving as a mentor is also really helpful in terms of understanding a bit how you can take advantage of those who are available to mentor you. It kind of helps you see the other side. And I think that that helps to strengthen the relationship as well. So I encourage all of you to think about, how can I be a mentor to those who are part of my circle?
Awesome. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom today. I was taking notes because I definitely learned a few things, and you gave me a different perspective on a couple things I hadn't thought of. So thank you so much.
So my absolute pleasure. I do have to just say two things quickly. One is always a pleasure to join my colleague and friend, Governor Lisa Cook. And so I just wanted to second some of the things that she said. Economics really does need all of your perspectives, your insights, and your voices. And I hope that you'll consider whether this is the right match for you. Certainly for me, it opened not only a lot of doors, but provided a lot of opportunities for a very varied career, and one that I continue to enjoy. And so thank you from my perspective as well for joining on this call. And it's been a pleasure, Josie, to have this conversation.
Thank you, Susan. The Federal Reserve System is lucky to have you as a leader. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Next up, we will transition to the panel of research assistants that we have with us today from across the Federal Reserve System. That means that they may work for the board or work directly for another reserve bank. Today we have research assistants representing the board and the Boston Fed, but before moving to that panel, I wanted to briefly answer some common questions that we receive. So first, I'll address internships. Internships are generally posted starting in September of every year through November. This generally holds true across the system, so across the board and the 12 Federal Reserve banks. So if you're interested in working at another Federal Reserve, say you're out in California today and the San Francisco Fed is closer to you, or you're in Atlanta or New York, you should begin surveying their websites by the end of August, early September. And again, generally speaking, internships are open for sophomores through juniors and master's students who are in a 2-year program. I like to emphasize that this is general. Each reserve bank does things a little bit differently, so you should definitely check out their careers webpage and learn what's specific to them, depending on what your interests are. And then moving into applications for research assistants, again, generally speaking, it follows the same timeline of September through November applications. And these are research assistantships are usually for seniors because these are full-time roles that commence upon graduation. Whether you can apply based on your visa status varies from Federal Reserve Bank to bank. You should review each job description carefully to learn whether you are eligible to apply. You can visit fedeconjobs.org to learn more about opportunities across the Federal Reserve System. So again, with us today, we have 5 research assistants. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, and Senior Research Assistant Mike McHenry will lead them in this panel session today. Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Josie, and thanks, President Collins. So my name is Mike McHenry. I grew up in Easton, Pennsylvania, and graduated from Gettysburg College in 2021 with a degree in economics. And then in July of 2021, I joined the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. So I've been here almost 2 years now.
Hello, everybody. My name is Zora Zafari. I'm from Arizona, where I studied economics, global politics, and mathematics at Arizona State University. I've been a research assistant for almost 3 years now at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, where I work in the household decision-making group and do research on consumer behavior.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hope Bodenschatz, and I'm also a senior research assistant at the Boston Fed. I'm from Pennsylvania, and I went to college at Penn State University and studied economics, geography, and political science, and did my master's in economics there. and now I work in the New England Public Policy Center.
Sydney, I'm not sure we're able to hear you right now. Sorry. Yeah, that's great.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. My name is Sydney Keenan, and I'm a senior research assistant in the Board of Governors. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, and then I attended Purdue University in Indiana, where I studied applied math and economics, and then I got my master's in economics as well. And I've been at the board for about 2 years now in the monetary and financial market analysis section.
Hi, I'm Ruth Cohen. I'm originally from St. Paul, Minnesota, and then I did my undergrad in economics with a minor in mathematics at Kenyon College in Ohio, and I've been an RA at the Boston Fed for almost 3 years now. I'm in the macro finance group, and I do a lot of research on consumer payment systems.
All right, great. Thank you all for the introduction. So we'll get started with our questions for the panel, and we'll get started just with our first question. Could you guys describe what the day-to-day life of a research assistant is at the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, I can start with that question, Mike. So the day-to-day life of a research assistant is it's varied. No day is the same. Each day, though, I do a lot of coding, and within that coding, I'll be pulling data, doing data analysis, and trying to answer questions that are posed by economists around me and that I might come up with on my own. My time, though, is split half and half between doing research and working on policy work. So the specific questions I'll be working on really depend on the type of work I am doing. Overall, though, there's a lot of coding and a lot of reading and a lot of communicating between economists and other research assistants and other divisions and sections.
Upon that, my tasks are also primarily divided into policy work, which is more fast-paced, it's high priority, and this includes gathering data, creating charts and tables, and helping with presentation for like talks and FOMC meetings. And then on the flip side, the research projects are kind of more long-term, and what I'm currently working on is how people make retirement decisions. So we're using this large survey data, which tend to require a lot of data cleaning and structuring so that you can answer like some of the questions that you may have as a researcher.
Great, and to follow up on that in just a little bit more detail, a two-part question here. What are the highs and if any lows of working at the Federal Reserve? And what's the most difficult part of your day-to-day work?
Yeah, I can take that. Kind of like Zora said about having some pretty big data sets that you have to clean, I would say definitely some of the lows of this job, they might not be specific to the Fed, but a lot of the data can be very messy. I work with a lot of like credit bureau data and like credit card account data that's not very well cleaned and can have a lot of like errors that I find in the data, and then I report to other people, and then they have to like go back to different banks and get the right data. So there's not necessarily the best documentation for a lot of the data sets that I work with, and I feel like I personally enjoy, thinking about questions and how to answer them with the data, but I don't necessarily enjoy cleaning the data. That's not maybe the most interesting task. So that's sort of the lows of this job, and I would say probably the most difficult part for me has been getting really like into nitpicky parts of the data. And I would say definitely like the highs of this job are the other people that I work with. I work with one economist one-on-one, and she's been a really great mentor to me in my career. And then I also just really enjoy having a community of RAs who are all similar ages and similar stages of life and sort of wanting the same things, interested in the same career, and sort of just the conversations that we have can be really rewarding for sure.
I'll add on to that question as well. So one of the most difficult parts for me is communication. And I mentioned that in my job, I'm communicating a lot between different economists and sections and divisions. And everyone communicates in different styles. And it was a challenge to learn how to best communicate with different people who work in different ways. For example, some people really like you to email them with a long, detailed list of what you're working on and what you've discovered during your investigations, and so on and so forth. Other economists really like you to ping them or send them short little messages frequently about a brand new update you might have, even if it's still a work in progress. So it was a little bit difficult figuring out how each economist works and how each section and division works. But once I was able to figure that out, it made work a lot more smooth and a lot more enjoyable. Very similar to Ruth, some of the best parts of this job are the people. The people here at the board are incredibly dedicated to their job and they're incredibly dedicated to the mission of the Fed. For me, service is really important in my life, and being able to do or do service and give back to my community with a bunch of other like-minded people has been a wonderful experience.
Thank you both for that. So now that we've heard a little bit more about what it's like to work in a research assistant role at the Federal Reserve, I was curious if any of you would like to share what your path was to getting this research assistant position or working at the Federal Reserve.
I can talk about my pathway a little bit since it's a little unconventional. Although I don't really think there's a conventional pathway to this position in the field of economics. But I really didn't have a sense of what a career in economics looked like or what an economist really does. I originally wanted to go to law school, and I majored in econ because I heard econ majors do well on the law school admissions exam. But the more econ courses that I took, I was really fascinated and to think about like the potential impact economic research can have in terms of not just understanding and evaluating policy, but also help forming policy. And the critical skills that you need for this type of research, you get through a PhD in economics. So I decided I would stay an additional year in undergrad to do a math minor and take the necessary math courses. And then my undergraduate advisor also encouraged me to apply to RA positions to get research skills. And he was previously a New York Fed economist. So he told me about the Fed RA positions, and he said you can continue taking your math courses and acquire the research skills that you would need to apply to a PhD. So that's what I did. I applied to these RA positions, and I ended up here at the Boston Fed. And then later this summer, when I finish my position, I'll be starting my PhD in economics.
Great, thank you. This next question I think is a good one because I think it applies to a lot of the people in the audience as well as probably a lot of the panelists. What are the benefits and drawbacks of entering the workforce after graduation as opposed to immediately attending graduate school? So for a student trying to pursue a PhD in economics, is a gap between undergrad to pursue research opportunities more beneficial than immediately continuing their education?
This one, as this was something that I wrestled with as I neared the end of my college career. And I'd say there's certainly upsides and downsides of both paths. And ultimately it kind of ends up being up to you and what you feel that you need. So I'll give you a little bit of insight into what I was thinking about when I was making that decision. And I ended up taking a little bit of a hybrid path. So I did a 5-year integrated undergraduate-graduate program where I started taking graduate courses for my master's in my 4th year of college and stayed a 5th year to finish that. And then in my last year of college, I kind of faced this question again, thinking about whether I wanted to apply for PhD programs to start right after I graduated with my master's, or if I wanted to, do an RA position, get some workforce experience. And I would say, in terms of thinking about going directly to a PhD program, there's definitely some upsides of that. You're used to the rhythm of coursework. Your skills are sharper. Probably you've just taken a lot of econ and math classes. And I would say definitely if you feel certain that a PhD is the right path and you want to be working in research and maybe teaching as well in a professorship, you can definitely save time. You kind of get an earlier start on the process if you apply right out of school. But ultimately, that wasn't what I did. And for me, getting the master's degree was a really helpful kind of step between undergrad and starting a PhD. And it helped me to get some clarity on what economics graduate work was like. It does feel different than undergraduate work. You'll get into more math and theory. But the first year coursework between a master's and a PhD is relatively similar. So it can also help to prepare you when you enter the PhD program to kind of know a little bit more what you're getting into. And then finally, I found it really, really helpful to have the chance to undertake my own research project while I was doing my master's. And you might have that opportunity too as well, you know, in undergraduate courses. But however you do that, I really recommend taking that opportunity because I think you learn a lot about yourself as a researcher. You learn a lot about your interests when you have a chance to do that. And then the last thing I wanted to say, now that I've spent almost 2 years in this RA position, there's a lot that I've benefited from in terms of taking some time off, spending some time in the workforce before I end up applying to PhD programs. And I think getting some real world experience really helps you to be better informed to think about, you know, is research the type of job that I want to be doing? You know, do I need a PhD for the career that I want to have? Those are questions that I've been thinking about for the past couple of years. And I think a huge one for me has been thinking particularly about what I want to research in a PhD program. And I think that's something that I'll be able to approach, you know, in a much different way now that I've had some time off to explore those interests, to get some different exposure to fields of economics and to other disciplines at the Fed. And so I think that's something that, you know, when I start my PhD will be different for me than when I was starting my master's right after undergraduate work. And then just two more things too. It's a great opportunity to save some money while you're working and making a salary, as well as it's a great opportunity, especially you know, RA positions in economics, to boost your competitiveness for top programs. So if you're looking to kind of take some more math classes while you're in an RA position, all of that is, you know, as well as gaining research intuition and experience, all of that's available to you here.
Yeah, just adding on to what Hope was saying about these sort of pre-doc or RA positions making you slightly more competitive. I think that it's increasingly become sort of the norm for students looking to go to more top programs in economics that they would have some kind of a pre-doc or an RA position at like a central bank or a think tank or an academic institution. Because like Zora mentioned, like I'm going to be starting my PhD as well this summer. So I've been going to a lot of visit days, and I think it really is the vast majority of people there have taken some time between undergrad and PhD to do some kind of RA position. And you know, I think that there are certain types of students who enter undergrad knowing exactly what they want to do and that they want to get a PhD in economics and having really strong motivations and knowing to take like the right math courses and things like that. But personally, I was not that student. I sort of decided this was something I wanted to do like near the end of my undergrad career. And so I had some math courses that I wanted to take while I was working at the Fed. And I also just felt like I really needed to get a better sense of what I wanted to research and get some more experience with doing economic research. And I think that sort of taking that space between undergrad and grad school is really valuable to sort of develop your own motivations for what you want to study. So I think I've definitely gotten a lot out of this job at the Fed, and I think that it's very, very common to take 2 years in economics. That said, I'm not looking forward to first year classes and having to get back into being a full-time student, working very hard on problem sets. Yeah, so that'll definitely be a transition that I think would be less difficult if I was coming straight from undergrad to a grad program.
Yeah, thank you both for talking about your experiences there. Switching gears a little bit from graduate school, I was wondering what are some things that high school students can do to prepare themselves for a college major and potential career in economics?
Mike. Like Ruth said, there's a pretty big transition from going from college to graduate school, and that's the exact same way with high schoolers going to college. It's a very large transition, and it's hard to prepare for it sometimes. If you're really interested in economics, the best thing you can do to prepare is to develop a strong math background. Economics uses a lot of math, so being able to understand where that math is coming from will be incredibly helpful. Overall, though, I would recommend developing good study habits while you're in high school, because a big part of college is going to be studying and learning, sometimes on your own. So if you develop those habits early on in high school and you figure out the best way that you learn, whether if you're a visual learner, a hands-on learner, an auditory learner, if you figure that out in high school, it'll make your transition to college and it'll make your work in college a lot easier. Also, learning how to stay organized is incredibly important. Sometimes that's easier to do in high school if you aren't juggling a bunch of different classes and also juggling doing your own laundry and clubs and organizations. And that's all something that you'll have to do in college. So, learning how to stay organized in high school and learning how to use a planner, whether that's a paper planner or an online planner, some app, all of those are really beneficial skills to develop now before transitioning into college. And by having those organizational skills and study skills and a strong math background, you'll be a lot more prepared, both in college to study economics or any other major that you might be interested in.
Okay, and we're on our last question. We want to ask, what skills do you think will make an applicant a competitive candidate for an RA position?
Yeah, and I'd be happy to take that question. So I think as you've all touched on, a good math background is certainly helpful. I think knowing certain math concepts is helpful to the job. So if you can take math courses and have a little room in your schedule, if you're not a math major or minor, I think that's always useful. Saying that, I don't think that should discourage anyone who doesn't have a tremendous math background from applying, right? So I'm an example of that. I didn't take much math in college, and I think getting here, I realized it would have helped to have had that background and know a little bit more about mathematics in general. So I think building up math skills is helpful in making you a competitive candidate. Another hard skill would be computer science and coding skills. So a lot of our job as research assistants is spent at a computer coding, working in like R, Python, MATLAB, Stata, all these various statistical and computer softwares. So I think getting some exposure to these different languages is very helpful. And now there's training that the board offers, the banks offer as well, but having some exposure to writing scripts in various languages makes you pretty competitive. I think experience with research assistants and with independent research is also super helpful. So if you've written a capstone paper or a thesis or something like that, um, that's helpful as far as getting you experience with walking through each step of the research process. And I think economists really appreciate when you come in with some knowledge of the research process. And if you come in with some idea of a question that you might want to ask and might want to pursue in your time as a research assistant, right? And coming in with enthusiasm to do that research. I think the last point I would really kind of nail home is make clear that you are able to communicate well. I think that communication is probably the biggest part of this job, right? The hard skills are important, but actively communicating with your economists, with your bosses, what you do and do not know is going to be very beneficial to you, right? It's not the expectation that you come into the Fed in a research assistant position and you're going to write a paper within your first 2 years there, right? So they know, the economists, the people you work with, they know that, you know, you're trying to learn too, right? So being upfront about things you don't know but want to learn about, and what your research interests are and what your policy interests are helpful as well. And getting that across in an interview helps to make you a competitive candidate. And so I think with that said, I think we're probably going to wrap up our RA panel, and I'm going to toss it back to Josie. So thank you guys for taking those questions.
Joining us today and for sharing and all of your answers to those questions. If you, audience, would like to engage with the research assistants and you're on WebEx, don't forget that you can join us in just a few minutes. So I would like to reiterate, thank you for your time and for your attention to this program. It really is a joy to bring it to you directly. I think virtually has been you know, exciting and very giving in terms of how far out we can reach with our Exploring Careers in Economics. But before we move into the breakout sessions, I did want to thank all of our participants today for their insight, for their time, for their wisdom shared. And I hope that you viewers found all of that meaningful and helpful to what you're thinking about doing next. I'd like to give a special thank you to Robin Capetto and the Public Information Outreach team and everyone behind the scenes for their continued work and dedication to exploring careers in economics. This is literally, it cannot be done without you. Ways to keep in touch with us include receiving our quarterly newsletter and visiting our website to learn about multiple ways. We have Coffee with an Economist. We have info sessions that we give regularly, and all of that information is detailed on our public website. And in echoing Governor Cook's remarks, it cannot be stated enough that this economy belongs to everyone. And as such, we need to make sure that we're all represented in this field. We hope to see your applications for our internships and for our research assistantship opportunities in the fall. So thank you for your time and attention. And for those of you interested in joining a breakout room, stay on the line and you'll be moved in just a few moments. That concludes this portion of the event. Have a great day, everyone.